What would you do if the only way to escape a lifetime of chains was to kiss a stranger in front of everyone you've ever feared? Tonight, in the heart of a ruthless werewolf pack, one desperate Omega makes a choice that will shatter destiny itself. The grand hall of the Blackthorn Pack pulsed with anticipation, its towering stone arches draped in crimson banners that fluttered like bloodied cloth in the torchlight. Tonight was no ordinary gathering. This was the mating ceremony, a night when alliances were forged, destinies sealed, and power traded like coin. The air was thick with musk, nerves, and the electric crackle of dominance displays as wolves of every rank crowded shoulder to shoulder, waiting to see who would claim whom. If you love dangerous romance, shocking twists, and stories where every choice has teeth, make sure to subscribe, because this is only the beginning. At the heart of it all stood Elara Voss, the Omega daughter of no one important, her back pressed to the cold marble wall as though the stone could swallow her whole. She tugged at the sleeves of her threadbare gown, a pale blue thing borrowed from another servant, the hem already fraying. Her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, and her stomach churned with dread. She was prey among predators, a lamb delivered to the wolves. Her gaze swept the room, and the sight made her throat tighten. Betas lounged in clusters, their broad shoulders draped in silks, their eyes glinting with hunger, not the hunger of affection, but of possession. They saw Omegas as tools, warm bodies for their beds, pliant partners to display like trophies. Elara had overheard their whispers. She knew her fate if one of them claimed her tonight. A life spent bowing, breaking, obeying. No freedom, no voice, no escape. The elders began the chant that signaled the ritual's start, their voices rumbling like distant thunder. The crowd quieted. The moment had come. Elara's heartbeat pounded in her ears as the first names were called, the first matches declared. Laughter, cheers, growls of approval. One by one, Omegas stepped forward, their hands claimed, their futures sealed. And then, silence. Heads turned. The elder's voice rose again, announcing her name. Elara Voss. She froze. Heat surged into her cheeks as all eyes fell on her. The betas smirked, baring teeth, already circling like vultures. A few stepped forward, confident she had no say, that she was nothing more than a prize for the taking. Her lungs seized. This couldn't happen. She couldn't let them decide her fate. Not tonight, not ever. And then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw him. A figure in the shadows near the hall's edge. Tall, cloaked in rags, posture deceptively casual. His presence was so out of place, so strange, that she blinked twice, certain she imagined him. A beggar, she thought at first. A stray allowed in to witness the pack's cruel theatre. Yet something about him stilled the panic in her chest. He was watching everything with a sharpness that didn't belong to the downtrodden. The elders called her name again. A beta growled her direction, hand outstretched. Elara's stomach turned cold. In a heartbeat, instinct seized her. Before fear could drag her down, she surged forward, crossing the room with desperate speed. Gasps followed her. Whispers rippled through the crowd. She didn't stop, not until she stood before the ragged stranger, her hand fisting the front of his worn cloak, and then, without thought, without plan, she kissed him. The hall exploded. Gasps, shouts, the crackle of growls cut through the stunned silence. The betas snarled in outrage. The elders sputtered in shock. Elara clung to the kiss like a lifeline, praying this insane gambit might be enough to buy her a moment, a chance, a reprieve from the claws of her so-called suitors. When she pulled back, her chest heaving, her voice rang louder than she ever thought possible. "He is my chosen mate." The words echoed against stone, shocking even herself. The stranger blinked, then let out a low chuckle. Not the laugh of a beggar, but something rich and dangerous. His lips curved into a sly grin, and when he spoke, the room went utterly still. "Then so it shall be," he said. The timbre of his voice rolled through the crowd, powerful enough to silence even the loudest protest. The betas' snarls faltered, unease creeping into their eyes. The elders stiffened. They had expected resistance, denial, outrage. But instead, this ragged stranger accepted her claim. No hesitation, no fear. The lead elder stepped forward, suspicion darkening his gaze. "State your name, outsider. By what right do you claim her?" For a moment, tension stretched taut as a bowstring. Then the man straightened, shedding the illusion of meekness. His rags looked less like poverty now, and more like a deliberate disguise. His eyes, sharp as obsidian, burned with amusement. "Damien Blackthorn," he said, his grin widening as murmurs surged like wildfire. "By right of blood and crown." The crowd erupted in chaos. Elders shouted, Omegas gasped, Betas stumbled back as though burned. Elara's blood turned to ice. She staggered, the world tilting beneath her feet. Damien Blackthorn, the Alpha King, the one whispered about in every corner of the realm, elusive and untouchable, a shadow that ruled above all others. And she had kissed him, claimed him, bound herself to him before the entire pack. Damien turned to her then, his expression unreadable save for the flicker of dark amusement in his gaze. He leaned close enough that only she could hear. "Bold move, little Omega," he murmured. "Let's see how far you're willing to play this game." Her lips parted, but no words came. She had gambled everything on one reckless act of defiance. Now she was tied to the most dangerous man alive, and there was no turning back. Elara's knees nearly buckled as the weight of her reckless choice pressed down on her. The torches, the gasps, the chaos in the hall, all of it blurred at the edges. She could barely comprehend the sly gleam in Damien's dark eyes as the pack dissolved into uproar around them. But she had no time to protest. The Alpha King, or the man she had foolishly thought a beggar, wrapped an arm around her waist with the casual authority of someone used to being obeyed. His grip was firm, unyielding, yet oddly protective. With a curt nod to the elders, he announced that tradition demanded privacy for a newly claimed pair. Before the Betas could claw their way forward in rage, Damien swept her through the hall's side doors and into the cold night air. The last thing she saw of the pack's furious faces was the gleam of teeth and narrowed eyes promising vengeance. She awoke to silence. Elara blinked, her lashes heavy, the scent of pine and wood smoke filling her senses. A soft crackle of fire echoed nearby. She was lying on a pallet of furs, the flickering glow of a hearth casting long shadows across a rough-hewn cabin. Confusion seized her. This was no chamber in the pack's village. Sitting up, she clutched the blanket to her chest, her heart lurching. Where am I?" "You're safe." The voice came from the far side of the room. He was there, crouched beside the fire, feeding it with a deliberate calm that made her bristle. He no longer looked like the beggar she'd kissed in desperation, but neither did he carry himself as the Alpha King she now knew him to be. His cloak still hung in tatters, his hair falling loose around his face, but there was a quiet authority in his movements, as if every gesture was deliberate theatre. "You," she began, anger and fear knotting in her throat. "You tricked me. You're—" He turned then, his eyes meeting hers with that same unreadable darkness. "I'm Rafe," he interrupted smoothly, his tone laced with practiced ease. "A rogue, an exile. Once, I thought I could challenge the Alpha for my freedom. I failed, and now I'm nothing but a wanderer." Elara narrowed her eyes. Lies. She could feel the hollowness in his story, the gaps left deliberately unfilled, but he delivered it with such composure, such unshakable presence, that her protest caught in her throat. "How you expect me to believe that?" she demanded, pulling the blanket tighter. "You're free to believe what you like," he said, shrugging as though it mattered little. "But for the pack to accept us as bonded, they must think we've consummated the ritual, which means little Omega appearances must be kept." Her cheeks flamed and she sputtered. You think I'll just—" "I think," he cut in, his voice low and steady, "that if you want to survive, you'll play along, unless you'd rather I march you back and hand you over to the Betas you so cleverly escaped." His words were a blade, sharp and merciless. Yet beneath them, Elara caught a glimmer of something else, an odd restraint, as though he were testing her limits but refusing to cross them. The hours that followed crawled with unbearable tension. Rafe, as he insisted she call him, busied himself with tending the fire, stripping bark for kindling, moving about the cabin with silent purpose. Elara, restless and suspicious, could not stop watching him, the way his shoulders shifted beneath the rags, the way he moved with quiet strength, controlled but lethal. No exile moved like that. Her suspicions deepened when she noticed the bloodstains darkening his sleeve. "You're hurt," she said, unable to keep the edge of concern from her tone. "I've had worse," he muttered. "You'll make it worse if you keep ignoring it." She rose, clutching the blanket as she searched the cabin. A small satchel yielded herbs and bandages, and before he could protest, she knelt beside him, gently tugging at the torn sleeve. His arm tensed under her touch, the muscles hard as stone. She ignored the flicker of heat in her chest and focused on cleaning the wound, a shallow gash, but deep enough to risk infection. "Hold still," she said, surprising herself with the firmness of her tone. Rafe smirked faintly, though his eyes followed her every movement. "Commanding for an Omega." "Desperate for survival," she shot back, tying the bandage tight. For a heartbeat, their eyes locked. Sparks crackled between them, unspoken and dangerous. Elara looked away first, her pulse racing. But outside their fragile truce, danger stirred. Back at the pack's village, the betas seethed. Their prize had been stolen before their very eyes, their humiliation compounded by the elders' silence. They whispered among themselves, voices low and venomous. "She can't have chosen him," one snarled. "He's no wolf of ours," another hissed. "A fraud, a pretender." By nightfall, the first spies slipped into the woods, determined to track the pair, expose the ruse, and reclaim what they believed was theirs. The lodge slept in uneasy quiet. Elara tossed beneath the furs, her thoughts a storm. Who was this man really? Why had he agreed to her reckless claim? And why, despite every warning in her head, did her chest ache with the memory of his voice, the press of his lips against hers? A creak outside shattered her thoughts. Her breath caught. She sat upright, listening, the sound of branches snapping, low growls carried on the wind. Before she could cry out, Rafe was already moving. His posture sharpened, his casual slouch vanishing. His eyes glowed faintly in the firelight, a predator's focus igniting within them. He motioned her to silence, his finger to his lips, before slipping toward the door. The cabin's wooden frame shuddered as something slammed against it. Elara gasped. Shadows moved outside, too many to count. The door burst open. Figures lunged in, claws gleaming, teeth bared. Betas, driven mad with jealousy and rage. Elara stumbled back, her heart clawing its way into her throat. One of them reached for her, and she screamed. But Rafe was faster. His body blurred, his movements fluid and brutal. He caught the beta by the throat, slamming him into the wall with such force the cabin shook. Another leapt at his back. He spun, eyes blazing, a growl tearing from his chest that vibrated through the floorboards. Elara froze, wide-eyed. That was no rogue's growl. That was an alpha's command, primal and undeniable. The betas faltered, but their numbers pushed them forward. Elara darted toward the back, only for another attacker to cut her off, his claws raking the air inches from her face. She cried out, stumbling. And then Damien was there. He moved with lethal precision, dragging her behind him, his body shielding hers. His instincts slipped through the mask he wore, protective and fierce, his every motion screaming authority. In one swift strike, he sent the attacker sprawling, then turned, his hand gripping Elara's wrist. "Run!" he growled. They plunged into the midnight forest, shadows chasing at their heels. The trees whipped past in a blur, the betas' snarls echoing like wolves on the hunt. Branches snapped, claws slashed at the air, but Damien pulled her onward, his grip unbreakable, his speed relentless. Her lungs burned, her legs trembled, yet every time she faltered he was there, steady, unyielding, dragging her forward through the dark. At last they stumbled into a clearing, moonlight spilling over them like silver fire. The betas closed in, circling. Elara's chest heaved, fear and adrenaline mixing until she could barely stand. But Damien straightened, his rags torn, his eyes alight with a power she could no longer deny. His snarl split the night, and for the first time, Elara saw him not as a beggar, not as a rogue, but as the alpha he truly was. Her breath caught, a shiver racing down her spine. And against all reason, all fear, a flicker of something else ignited deep within her chest. Attraction, forbidden, unstoppable. The game had changed. The clearing still hummed with the echoes of battle. Betas sprawled broken in the dirt, their groans fading into the night as Damien's growl tapered off into silence. Elara clutched her chest, trying to steady the wild rhythm of her heart. She had seen something, felt something in that fight that shattered every lie he had spun. No exile moved like that, no rogue commanded with such primal authority. But Damien only released her wrist, stepping back into shadow, his voice calm. "We can't linger. They'll regroup." Elara wanted to scream at him, demand answers, but exhaustion dragged her body toward obedience. They ran until the first hint of dawn colored the trees, and when Damien finally slowed, they found refuge in a narrow hollow beneath the roots of an ancient oak. There, sleep claimed her, restless and fractured. By mid-morning, the forest was quiet, broken only by birdsong. Elara stirred, waking to the sound of a blade cutting through the air. She pushed herself up, blinking against the sunlight, and froze. Damien was in the clearing, stripped down to his shirt, moving with a grace that stole her breath. He held a wooden staff, spinning and striking as if sparring with an invisible foe. Every motion was precise, economical, powerful. His muscles coiled and released in perfect rhythm, his eyes narrowed in focus. She had never seen anyone fight like that. For a moment, she simply watched, transfixed. Then his voice cut across the clearing, startling her. "Staring won't make you stronger, little Omega." Heat rushed into her cheeks. "I wasn't—" she stammered, then clamped her mouth shut. He smirked, lowering the staff. "If you're going to survive, you'll need more than luck. Come." "What?" "You'll learn to fight." Elara hesitated, wrapping her arms around herself. "I'm not a warrior." Neither was prey, until it decided it wanted to live. Something in his tone left no room for argument. Reluctantly, she stepped into the clearing, her bare feet cool against the moss. Damien handed her a smaller branch, its weight awkward in her grip. "Show me how you defend yourself," he said. She raised the stick uncertainly. He sighed, circling her like a predator appraising its catch. Then, with startling swiftness, he tapped her wrist, and her makeshift weapon clattered to the ground. "You'd be dead already." Frustration burned hot in her chest. "Then teach me," she snapped, surprising even herself. His gaze sharpened, a flicker of something, approval, in his dark eyes. Again. Hours blurred as he drilled her, each failed attempt met with curt corrections. Elara's arms ached, sweat dampened her brow, but determination rooted her in place. For every stumble she rose again, for every mistake she met his gaze with stubborn fire, and somewhere in the rhythm of their sparring, the tension between them shifted. His touch, guiding her stance, lingered a heartbeat too long. Her pulse quickened when his breath brushed her cheek as he corrected her grip. By the time the sun dipped low, she collapsed at the riverbank, plunging her hands into the cool water. Damien sat nearby, silent, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Elara's chest ached with unspoken words. She had carried her past like a stone in her throat for years, but tonight the weight threatened to crush her. "My family," she began softly, her reflection trembling in the water. They were no one important. Farmers, kind, loyal to the pack. But when politics soured, when the alphas shifted alliances, they were expendable. Her voice cracked and she drew a shaky breath. They died for a power struggle that had nothing to do with them, and I was left with nothing. Damien's expression remained unreadable, but his jaw tightened, his hand curling into a fist against his knee. "They told me Omegas exist to serve," Elara whispered, "but I swore I'd never let anyone chain me the way they did my parents. That's why I—" She trailed off, shame flooding her cheeks. "That's why I kissed you." Silence stretched between them, heavy and fragile. Then Damien leaned closer, his voice low. "You're stronger than they ever gave you credit for." Her heart stuttered. His eyes caught hers, dark and intense, and for one reckless, suspended moment, the world narrowed to the space between them. His lips dipped closer. Hers parted, trembling with anticipation. Then the forest exploded in snarls. Shadows lunged from the trees, rogues lean and feral, their eyes wild with hunger. Elara barely had time to scramble to her feet before Damien moved, but this time he didn't hold back. He tore through the rogues with brutal efficiency, every strike a revelation. His movements were no longer calculated restraint, but raw, unleashed dominance. Power radiated from him, unmistakable and primal, his growl shaking the air itself. Elara froze, awe and terror warring in her chest. No beggar, no exile, no wraith, only an alpha. When the last rogue crumpled, Damien straightened, his chest heaving. Elara stared, her pulse thundering. "You," she breathed. He wiped blood from his cheek, forcing a smirk that rang hollow. "Luck." Her disbelief burned, but before she could press, a sharp horn blast echoed through the woods. Both their heads snapped up. A rider approached, the messenger's cloak marked with the crest of the Blackthorn Pack. The wolf dismounted, bowing stiffly. "By order of the council, the Alpha King demands your presence." Elara's breath caught. Her gaze darted to Damien. The Alpha King. Her blood chilled. What would he do now? Damien's face betrayed nothing. "Tell your king," he said smoothly, "that his summons will be answered, soon." The messenger hesitated but bowed again, retreating into the trees. Elara's mind raced. If Damien wasn't the king, then who was he? And if he was, why hide it? That night, they captured one of the spies who had stalked them through the woods. Elara, tending to the prisoner while Damien kept his distance, overheard words not meant for her ears. "Royal blood," the spy hissed before Damien silenced him. "Your precious secret won't stay hidden long." Elara froze, her chest tightening. Royal. The word echoed like a bell in her skull. When Damien returned to the fire, she rose to her feet, fists clenched. "Enough," she said, her voice trembling with fury. "Who are you really? Don't feed me lies about being a rogue. Don't tell me it's luck. I saw you fight. I heard him call you royal blood." His eyes darkened, shadows flickering across his face. "Elara—" "No," she cut in, her voice breaking. "I risked everything claiming you. I deserve the truth." For a heartbeat, silence swallowed them both. Then the hiss of an arrow shattered the air. Assassins burst from the darkness, blades gleaming, eyes alight with murder. Damien lunged, pulling Elara behind him as steel clashed with claw, their fragile truce splintering beneath the weight of truth and blood. And as the night erupted in violence, Elara's demand for answers hung between them, unanswered but impossible to ignore. The assassins' bodies still littered the forest floor when the storm broke. Rain fell in sheets, soaking the earth, drowning the scent of blood but not the tension crackling between them. Damien stood motionless, his chest heaving, his eyes like smouldering coals as thunder rolled overhead. Elara pressed a trembling hand to the cave wall where they had taken shelter, the flicker of lightning illuminating her pale face. Her mind reeled with everything she had seen, his dominance, his impossible strength, the whispers of royal blood. At last, she found her voice. "You lied to me." Damien's head tilted, rain dripping from his hair. "I told you enough to keep you alive." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "You let me think you were a beggar, an exile. Do you have any idea what I risked, claiming you? What I—" Her voice cracked, her chest tightening with the memory of that desperate kiss. "I thought you were no one, but you're someone dangerous." He closed the distance between them in 2 measured steps, shadows clinging to him like a second skin. "I am no beggar," he admitted, his voice low, thrumming like distant thunder. "But there are truths that will destroy you if you hold them too closely. That's why I gave you lies." Her breath caught, torn between fury and the magnetic pull of his presence. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to shove him away. But the storm outside paled against the storm inside her chest. "Then tell me," she whispered, defiant, despite the tremor in her voice. "If you're not Rafe, then who are you?" His jaw clenched. Lightning split the sky, and in that flash she saw something raw in his eyes, a loneliness, a pain that mirrored her own. "I can't," he said finally. "Not yet." The words were a blade, carving open the chasm between them. Yet before Elara could hurl her anger, the cave seemed to shrink around them, the air thick with heat not born of fire, but of something far more primal. Hours crawled by with only the storm for company. Damien tended the fire in silence, his every movement deliberate, controlled. Elara sat opposite him, the flames painting shadows across her face, her emotions warring inside her chest. Betrayal tangled with relief, suspicion with desire. When at last the silence became unbearable, she spoke, not of him, but of herself. "My parents believed in the pack," she murmured, staring into the fire. "They died for it, and I've been nothing but its prisoner ever since. I thought if I bound myself to a stranger, I might finally escape." Her lips curved in a bitter smile. "And instead, I bound myself to you." Damien lifted his gaze. For the first time, the mask slipped. He wasn't the untouchable predator then, but a man carrying wounds she couldn't see. "You think you're the only one who's lost everything?" His voice was quiet, yet edged with steel. "I clawed my way through blood and betrayal to stand where I do. And when I reached the top, there was nothing waiting. No family, no peace, only isolation." Elara blinked, startled by the naked honesty in his tone. He rarely revealed himself, but now, like cracks in armor, his past bled through. "Then why hide?" she asked softly. "Because truth is a weapon, and I will not place it in my enemy's hands." The storm deepened, thunder shaking the cave. Elara shivered, though the fire still burned. Damien noticed. With a sigh, he shrugged off his cloak, tattered though it was, and draped it around her shoulders. His fingers brushed her arm, and her body jolted as though struck by lightning. Their eyes locked, and the air between them ignited. She should have pulled away, should have turned her face, reminded herself of every reason to mistrust him. But when Damien's hand rose to cup her jaw, rough thumb grazing her cheek, her resistance crumbled. His lips met hers. The kiss was nothing like the desperate gamble in the hall. It was fire and fury, hunger and surrender. It consumed her, unraveling the fragile walls she had built around her heart. His hand tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, while her own clutched his shirt as if to anchor herself against the storm raging inside. Heat coursed through her veins, awakening something ancient, instinctive. Her omega senses stirred, pulling toward him, recognizing him in ways her mind refused to admit. A bond thrummed beneath her skin, fierce and undeniable, whispering of fate. When they broke apart, both gasping, the cave felt alive with their pulse. "Elara," Damien began, but the words strangled in his throat. She pressed a trembling hand against his chest, where his heart hammered as wildly as hers. "Don't," she whispered. "Not if it's another lie." His silence was answer enough. The storm passed by morning, leaving the world washed clean. But peace was an illusion. Smoke rose on the horizon. Shouts carried faintly through the trees. Elara stiffened, recognizing the pack's war cries. "They've come," Damien said grimly. The Betas had returned, not alone but with allies. A rival pack's banners fluttered among the raiders, their forces pouring into the lodge like a tide of steel and claws. The enemy's excuse was thin, to rescue Elara from her supposed captor, but their hunger for power was unmistakable. The cabin they had called refuge erupted in flames as wolves clashed in the clearing. Elara's heart raced as she watched, torn between terror and fury. Damien stood at the front, rags whipping in the wind, his gaze fixed on the horde. For a moment, he looked like the rogue he claimed to be, but when the first wave crashed forward, his disguise shattered. His voice rang out, booming with authority that could not be denied. "Stand your ground!" The force of his alpha command rippled through the battlefield. Hidden allies, scouts, loyalists he had planted long before, rose from the trees at his call, answering him without hesitation. The raiders faltered, shaken by the power behind his roar. Elara stared, wide-eyed, as the truth finally blazed undeniable. This was no exile, no beggar, no false mate. This was the Alpha King, laying claim not just to his pack but to her. The battle raged around them, but Elara's choice cut sharper than any blade. She could flee, vanish into the woods, sever herself from the tangled lies that bound them. Or she could fight, stand beside him, not as a pawn or prize, but as a partner. Her chest tightened, the memory of his kiss burning her lips, the echo of his pain reflected in her own. When a rogue lunged at Damien's unguarded flank, she didn't think. She grabbed a fallen blade, intercepting the strike with trembling hands. The force nearly knocked her to the ground, but Damien was there in an instant, his snarl driving the enemy back. Their eyes met, fierce and unyielding. Loyalty, choice, a bond sealed not by ritual, but by fire. Elara lifted the blade again, stepping into the storm at his side. And for the first time, they fought not as strangers bound by accident, but as allies bound by something deeper, something neither could deny. The lodge still smoldered when Damien gave the order to march. His voice, raw with authority, cut through the chaos of retreat, summoning wolves loyal to his bloodline. By dawn, they stood before the towering gates of the pack's heartland, a fortress carved into the mountainside. Elara walked at his side, though each step felt like stepping into a pit of blades. The pack's whispers followed her like shadows. Omega, fraud, treason. She lifted her chin anyway, refusing to bow to their scorn. She had chosen loyalty in the fire of battle. She would not falter now. Inside the great hall, the elders awaited. Clad in ceremonial black, their gazes were cold and cutting. The tribunal was convened, their judgment already heavy in the air. "This Omega dares stand before us as mate to the Alpha King?" Elder Mela's voice cracked like a whip. "Her claim is a mockery of our traditions, a sham. Worse, it reeks of treason." Gasps rippled through the chamber, and Elara's blood chilled. Damien's snarl silenced the hall. "She is mine," he declared, his tone brooking no argument. "Chosen in blood, bound by fire. Any who challenge that challenges me." But the elders were not so easily cowed. Evidence was produced, vials of dark liquid found near the sacred well that nourished the pack. "This poison," the traitorous beta advisor declared, stepping forward with feigned grief, "was discovered after her arrival. She sought to weaken us, to undermine our king from within." His eyes glittered with malice, and Elara recognized the trap. The elders' murmurs grew louder. "If her loyalty is true, let her prove it," one decreed. Thus were the trials pronounced. The first trial was solitude, a mate vision quest deep within the temple caverns, where sacred herbs and chants guided her into the dreamscape. Alone, Elara walked through shifting visions, reliving her deepest fears, her parents' deaths, the jeers of betas, the crushing chains of servitude. Each memory cut her raw, yet through the torment, Damien's presence flickered, his hand reaching for hers, his voice urging her to rise. When she emerged hours later, drenched in sweat and trembling, her eyes burned with new fire. The elders whispered, unsettled. The second trial tested endurance, fasting, meditation, and physical hardship. Elara stumbled, collapsed, yet rose again, defiance blazing in her eyes. Damien watched from the shadows, forbidden to intervene, his fists clenched with helpless rage. That night, when the guards left them alone for a brief respite, he pulled her into his arms. "You shouldn't have to prove yourself to them," he murmured against her hair, his voice cracking with restrained fury. She tilted her face toward him, exhaustion etched into every line of her body. "If I don't, they'll never accept me. They'll never accept us." His mouth found hers then, desperate and searing. Their kiss deepened into heat and hunger, a claiming of body and soul that made the world fall away. For a stolen heartbeat there was no tribunal, no trials, no treachery, only them. When at last they parted, Damien's forehead rested against hers. "If they force you to reject me," he swore, his voice shaking, "I will abdicate. I will walk away from the throne itself." Her chest constricted, torn between awe and terror. She could not answer. Not yet. The final trial came in the arena. The circle of stone and sand was packed with wolves, their howls echoing as Elara stepped inside. Her task was simple: survive against the chosen challenger. But when the gates opened, her breath caught. It was no rogue or beta before her. It was Damien himself. The traitor had maneuvered the council into demanding a duel between Alpha and Omega, framed as a test of her worth, but designed as a trap to kill them both. Damien's eyes locked on hers, dark with fury, but he lifted his blade all the same. "Trust me," he mouthed. Steel clashed, sparks flew. He attacked with restraint, testing her defenses, forcing her to draw on every lesson he had drilled into her in the forest. Each strike rattled her bones, yet she refused to yield. Then the glint of something foul caught her eye. The challenger's second, Damien's own advisor, slipped a vial across the sand to one of the elders. A blade coated in poison gleamed in the challenger's grip. Elara's heart lurched. She lunged between Damien and the treacherous strike, knocking the blade aside with her own. Pain seared her arm, where the edge grazed her, but the poison was revealed. Gasps erupted as the weapon clattered to the ground. "The advisor!" she cried, her voice echoing. "He armed the challenger with poison to slay his own Alpha." All eyes turned. The beta's face twisted with rage, but the proof lay undeniable in the sand. Guards seized him as the arena roared with fury. Damien caught Elara as she staggered, the venom already burning through her veins. But worse, a shallow slash across his chest bled freely, his skin paling. He had shielded her from the killing blow, and now the poison seeped into him. "No," she whispered, clutching him as the world blurred. "Don't you dare leave me." Damien's eyes fluttered, his strength faltering at last. And as the pack erupted in chaos, the Alpha King, exposed, wounded, betrayed, slipped toward the edge of death in her arms. Damien's body lay limp against the altar stones, his breath shallow, his skin drained of color. The poison clung to him like a curse, relentless, spreading with each weakening heartbeat. Around them, the tribunal chamber echoed with divided voices, elders debating, rivals sneering, allies praying. But Elara heard none of it. She knelt at his side, tears streaking her cheeks, her hands trembling as she clutched his. "I won't lose you. Not now. Not after everything." The memory of their first kiss flashed through her mind, the desperate gambit that had begun it all, a lie to save herself, a kiss meant as a shield. And yet, that kiss had bound them, not by tradition, not by decree, by something deeper, older. "Elara?" Damien rasped, his eyes barely open but still burning for her. "Don't waste yourself." "Shut up," she whispered fiercely, pressing her forehead to his. "You saved me, again and again. Now it's my turn." She lifted her gaze to the elders. "Prepare the rite, the mate bond healing. I will call him back." Gasps swept the chamber. Such rituals were rare, dangerous, often fatal to the weaker bondmate. But she would not be denied. The elders, bound by ancient law, relented. Torches flared. The sacred circle was drawn, symbols painted in blood and ash. Elara stepped inside, her Omega instincts thrumming, her heart hammering with primal certainty. She pressed her lips to Damien's, soft, trembling, then fierce. Their first kiss had been deception. This one was destiny. Power surged through her veins, golden fire sparking beneath her skin, the bond blazing open between them. His agony became hers, his darkness her light. She screamed, pouring herself into him, refusing to let go. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then Damien gasped, arching against the stone, his eyes snapping open with a feral glow. The crowd recoiled as the bond sealed, undeniable, eternal. But there was no time to savor victory. The traitorous beta, unshackled in the chaos, lunged with a dagger, aiming for Elara's heart. Damien rose, weakened yet unbroken, his voice booming with alpha command. "Enough!" They faced the traitor together, side by side. The final confrontation did not take place in the dark tribunal chamber. Damien dragged him to the grand mating ceremony grounds, summoning every wolf to witness. It was there the truth would be laid bare. The traitor sneered, spitting venom about Elara's birth, her unworthiness. But she silenced him not with claws, nor steel, rather with the beggar's cloak. She stepped into the circle draped in the tattered garment that had once hidden Damien's true self. "This," she declared, voice clear as a bell, "is no shame. This cloak, this disguise, is proof that power is not in bloodlines or crowns but in choice. He chose me when I was nothing. I choose him now, knowing he is everything. That is the bond you cannot break." The crowd erupted, the tide turning. Wolves who had doubted now bowed their heads. The corruption of the betas was dragged into the light, their plotting exposed, their authority stripped. Damien knelt then, not as a king, not as a warrior, but as a man. His crown gleamed in one hand, his other reaching for hers. "Elara Voss," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I offer you my throne, my life, my heart, not because you saved me, not because the bond demands it, but because you are my mate in truth and forever. Will you claim me?" Tears welled in her eyes as she sank to her knees before him. "I already have." The cheers of the pack rose around them, thunderous and unyielding. That night, beneath the silver light of the moon, they held their private ceremony. No elders, no politics, no rivals, just the two of them in the clearing where their journey had begun. The bond blazed between them as they laughed, kissed, and whispered promises of futures unchained by shadows. Their passion burned hot, tempered with tenderness, sealing not just their claim, but their love. Elara tangled her fingers in Damien's hair, her breath ragged as his lips traced fire across her skin. "From beggar to king," she teased between gasps. "You've always been mine." "And you," he growled softly, lifting her as though she weighed nothing, "were always destined to be my queen." As the moon reached its zenith, they consummated their bond, their cries mingling with the wind, their vows etched into eternity. The Alpha King and his Omega, once bound by chance, now united by choice, stood at the dawn of a new era. Together, unstoppable, eternal.